country of Eswatini. The Eswatini Litigation Centre, alongside Mzwandile Banele Masuka, as well as partners, today filed an urgent application within the High Court of Eswatini to try and declare unconstitutional an agreement between the Kingdom of Eswatini and the United States of America, and that resulted in 5 foreign nationals with no familial or legal ties to the Kingdom of Eswatini being incarcerated at the Matsapa Maximum Correctional Facility following the deportation from the United States of America. And the concerns on the grounds focus on what this means for South Africa, especially given our existing issue with crime and high criminal activity within the Republic of South Africa. And joining us online is Melusi, Simelane, Civic Rights Cluster Lead from the South African Litigation Centre. Melusi, very good afternoon to you, and welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having us.
Thank you for your time this afternoon. Eswatini is the first SADC country to accept one of these planes with criminals that have been deported from the United States of America. And activists in Eswatini have filed that application questioning, is this actually legal in terms of accepting planes from the United States that have these criminals in them? Let's start the conversation on your thoughts of this whole situation, firstly, of having criminals deported to the SADC region.
Absolutely. The problem starts with having the government allow this to happen without any legal basis. You will remember that the country, in fact, any other country, for it to take any decision, it must be based on either a law or the constitution. And what we have here is that there is no legal precedent, there is no law that allows for this exchange of prisoners. If you look at the Transfer of Convicted Offenders Act, it speaks about Swazi nationals or residents who have been arrested in another country. And it doesn't anticipate a third country, a sort of a third-party country deal of exchange of prisoners. So this is quite unprecedented, and this is why we have decided to go to the courts, primarily because we want for the government to come clean, to say, what is this deal that they have gotten into with the United States of America without even consulting Parliament?
I think that's the concern here. I mean, Eswatini is a SADC country. They form part of the SADC region, and they are a neighbor as well to South Africa. So shouldn't they have consulted other SADC countries before actually going and making this agreement with the United States, since this can potentially pose some security threats to Eswatini neighbors?
In fact, if you read the statement that has come out of DECO, they're speaking exactly about this issue of the risk to national security, not just of Eswatini, but of South Africa, and of course by extension of the entire region. But there's also the immigration policy conversation, whereas as a regional bloc, we are constantly talking to each other about how do we make sure we're controlling our borders, but most importantly, how do we make sure that we control the movement of peoples. So now you've got these individuals who've been allowed entry into Eswatini, and for us as activists in the country, for us as civil society, we are actually raising concern into the fact that they've been brought into this country without following the law. And it's correct for SADC to actually raise concern, and it was correct for DECO to raise this concern with their counterparts in Eswatini to say, you should have spoken, perhaps not that you should have spoken to them, but you should at least be courteous enough to talk to them, to let them know that there is this kind of deal that is happening. But over and above that, I think I cannot emphasize enough the fact that this is a deal that the executive has taken without consulting the parliament. And this is a direct breach of the constitution, particularly section 238, which speaks to foreign relations and foreign engagements being one that must be ratified by parliament. But also, if you go to section 236, it speaks on those relations being one that actually favor the interests of the Swazi people. So right now, if you've got our neighbor South Africa raising concerns, the question begs, what is the national interest for Eswatini when our biggest trading neighbor, South Africa? In fact, we are part of the customs union. In fact, over 80% of our trade goes through South Africa. So if you are going to raise concern to those neighbors, then it raises the question about the interest of the Swazi people in Portland.
Now, how will Eswatini actually, handle the integration of these people that are being deported from America? We know that Eswatini has its own economic and social challenges. They're landlocked between South Africa and Mozambique as well. How will they actually be able to do this? I mean, the people coming over into Eswatini being deported, they are not citizens of the country. They have no ties to the country. They have no history in the country. How will they actually handle this challenge?
In fact, you're raising a very fundamental question that speaks to the nitty-gritties of this deal, because we must ask ourselves, why are these people in Swaziland? Are they here to be reintegrated into society? Or are they here to be incarcerated? And if they're here to be incarcerated, the question begs, what law in Eswatini have they broken for them to be incarcerated in Eswatini? And what competent court in Eswatini has convicted them for them to be incarcerated in our prisons? And you will remember that the United States, those who know the laws in the United States, they say the U.S. does not deport people unless they have served their time. So the U.S. will let you serve your time in their prisons, and then will deport you if they want to deport you. So these are people who would have finished their sentences in the U.S. And therefore, it is a human rights violation on their part that they are being dragged into a country called Swaziland and are being thrown into what is called maximum security for us. And I think it begs a lot of questions, even on the issue of human rights, to say these people are being held in our prisons without access to their lawyers, without access to their parents. And the question begs, have they even been allowed to contact their parents? And I think this is the bigger conversation that we want to have about Eswatini allowing people to enter the country under the clock of the night, for lack of a better word.
I think a question that is potentially on a lot of people's minds is the question on safety and security. Occasionally you will hear of prisoners escaping, whether it's maximum security prisons or just prisons in general. And now you're having these individuals being deported from America. They're going to be in Eswatini. Is there enough measures being put in place in Eswatini to ensure that safety and security of the general public?
I think what makes this whole thing hilarious, and in fact, you could think it's a play that's been done for crutch children, because the Human Rights Commission of Swaziland, working with the UNDP, had actually, as recently as May or June, released a report that speaks to the prison conditions in this country, and that said the prisons are under-resourced, the prisons are overpopulated, there are people who have been held in prison for longer periods than necessary. Forget about the fact that we do hear from the media of prisoners who escape each and every other month. That is something that happens anyway. So these are prisons that are under-resourced and overpopulated. In fact, if you talk about the Matsapa maximum prison, in and of itself is at an overcrowding of over 170%, just the Matsapa prison alone. So then you ask the question, how are you going to ensure that these people are kept behind bars? Because, and it pains me that we are saying, how are they going to be kept behind bars? Because we must also ask the question, what law did they break for them to be kept behind bars? But here we are, they're kept behind bars, and the question is, do we even have the capability to hold those people and not have them escape into our society? And if you read the crimes that they are said to have been convicted of in America, these are heinous and dangerous crimes that they've been convicted of. And we would not want to have these individuals in our society without due process, without the conversation being held as a nation through our representatives, which is Parliament. Because it's not to say people cannot be rehabilitated, but for a conversation where you are bringing third-party countries into the country without following due process, without following the law, I think it's a problem for a country that is celebrating 20 years of its constitution, and I think it's a problem for any democratic society.
I think the question is, what will this deportation agreement actually mean for the relationship that Eswatini has with, your other SADC countries, and especially with the neighboring countries of Eswatini being South Africa and Mozambique?
I think we are actually looking forward to the SADC summit that's coming up next week in Madagascar. And we are hoping that some of the heads of state, some of the brother leaders or sister leaders will raise this concern with the head of government or the king if he is attending the summit to say, how is this going to impact us? Because you are bringing supposedly dangerous criminals into your country, and you already know, and this is not to say that we've got porous borders in the region, but it's a fact that our borders in the region are not as rigid as they should be. People are always in and out, sometimes documented, sometimes undocumented. And over and above that, you are holding them in a prison facility that is overcrowded, that is under-resourced. And the question should beg, how are you going to keep these people safely behind bars over and above the fact that there is talk that they are open to welcoming more people? And this is going to be it's going to have to be a conversation that SADC has with Eswatini. And this is precisely why, as civil society, we've approached the courts to say, even before it gets to SADC level, let's start with the legal basis as a country, number one. But number two, let's also look into the constitutionality of it. The Prime Minister has overreached here. The executive has overreached by signing a deal with the United States without consulting Parliament, and over and above that, refusing to account to Parliament.
And is there really enough tension between members of the SADC region and the United States, given the recent tariffs as well? So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that SADC summit. But we are going to have to leave it there. Melusi, thank you so much for joining us on air and for your time and sharing your insight into the situation of those criminals that are going to be deported or that have been deported to the Kingdom of Eswatini. Thank you.